This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Okay, it is 6 p.m., so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the Easthampton City Council Finance Committee meeting for June 1st at 6 p.m. I don't believe we have any minutes. The mayors, I don't see the mayor, so I guess no mayor speak. Okay, so I think what I want to do just broadly in terms of tonight, we have most of the department heads here, or a lot of them anyway. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to have public speak. And then after public speak, we are going to start deliberating on any amendments that we might want to make. I don't know that we're necessarily going to be making any final decisions tonight, but there might be things that we want additional information on, or we want to get some feedback on, or we want to just talk through. So we'll start that process. And then after we do that for a little while, we are going to we're gonna stop talking about the budget for a bit, and we're gonna turn to talking about a bunch of appropriations, because we want to get those done if we can tonight, so that we don't have to discuss the budget on the 17th. So that is the gist of it. With that said, public speak. Is there anyone from the public who'd like talk, for instance, to sort of reflect on what you've seen, or any feedback or things that you think we should do with this budget? And I see Kira raised her hand, so I'll call on her first, and anyone who wants to speak in person, if you just want to line up near the podium, that'd be great. All right, Kira, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kira Henninger. I live on Maple Street. The budget hearings have provided some really helpful information and context about current revenue sources and the expenses needed to provide current services. The questions and dialogue at these meetings and out in the community have provided information about our values as a community. It is clear that any cuts at all will come at a cost, whether that be professional development, new equipment, programs, or personnel who provide direct services for our community. The loss of these things will have an impact on our community. This afternoon, I saw a group gathered by the pond and stopped to see what was happening. I was really moved by the speakers. This group had representatives from all the unions in our city, and they read a joint statement. They have been working together to come up with concessions they're willing to make and actually give up some of their benefits that they received through previously negotiated contracts. They do not have to do this. They already made concessions during the negotiation process. This is just one of many examples of why Easthampton is such a special place to live. The community really comes together. I understand that you can only cut from the budget and make recommendations to the mayor. But as you review both budget scenarios, I urge you to prioritize the people who work for our community and the much needed services and programs that they provide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kira. Yes, sir. You might need to turn the mic on. There's a little button, yeah.
The green light's on.
Oh, the green light's on, then go for it.
Yes, Alex Tracy DeYounger, 23.
I think it's on. There, now.
It's brighter now.
Oh, you're welcome.
Alex Tracy DeYounger, 23 West Lake Street. One issue I wanted to raise in regards to the city budget. The city operates a license plate reader made by a company called Flock Safety. People don't know what that is. It's located at the base of mountain. it's scanning and reading the license plate of every car that drives by, storing that in a nationwide database. So that raises a lot of privacy and civil liberty concerns, but more specific to the budget, cost, because you not only have to purchase this equipment, but there's an annual subscription fee. So the subscription fee, I mean, it's probably just a drop in the bucket with regards to our budget deficit, but also it opens up the city to civil liability. There's been incidents where these have misread license plates and led to people being ordered out of their cars at gunpoint because it mistook their car for a stolen car. In the city of Aurora, Colorado, was sued for $1.9 million over an incident just like this. So obviously, with a huge budget deficit already, I feel like that's a liability we don't need, in addition to all the other concerns about flock license plate readers. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you want to take, screen or not? Next.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Carol Broder, 72 Oliver Street. I do appreciate all the time and effort y'all, all these meetings over and over again. You must be exhausted. I do appreciate that. However, all the meetings that have been posted online and saying that you're forthcoming and transparency, I have a hard time believing that, because I don't see a line by line item. All these summaries, budget summaries, don't give the public, taxpayers, clear view of what exactly you want, you want our money for. These summary things, we all live on budgets. I can tell you what my budget is line by line, what I have coming in and what I have going out. And if going out was going to be more than coming in, I cut it. I don't do with it. So I'm wanting the city to do the same. I think that these summary things are not transparency. I want a line by line budget. I want a line by line itemized thing. And I know there's cuts. And if the city can't do it, make the cuts. I'm sure that many of us taxpayers who are living penny by penny, you talk about tax liabilities, the city has made a lot of poor decisions that have cost us as taxpayers a lot of money. So let's see, you say transparency. I don't see transparency. And I know I speak for many, many people about that. Thank you, though, for your time. Excuse me. One other thing, just looking at this, a lot of people are this hurts to see when there's one side and there's next side and it's grouped like that. It's like it's them against us, and it shouldn't be that way. You want community. This is not community. Thank you.
It looks like. Good evening, Ken Kuzinski, Overland Drive. I have a number of suggested cuts, and I'll only go into a few of them here. One of the things that I want to reiterate is that in reviewing the school budget, it once again looks like there's still little to no admin cuts and a lot of frontline staff cuts. And I know that looks good in terms of getting people to vote yes, but it also looks bad in that we have so many chiefs running the show, and we're laying off frontline staff that actually do the direct care work with our students. I see in the org chart a diversity coordinator. Frankly, if our administrators and teachers can't manage to promote diversity on their own at this point without someone specifically designated being paid to do that, then we have a bigger problem. Curriculum coordinators. For years, principals and teachers managed curriculum without a curriculum coordinator. I think we can get rid of a few levels of administrative staff at the school district and try to preserve some of our teachers. And also, I think the focus in our budget really should be on necessity and not extras. We all would love to have an Easthampton arts coordinator, but it's not a necessity. It's not safety, it's not school, it's not public health. And it's $60,000 that could be used for somebody else's salary. That is a necessity, a frontline staff person. And the same with the sustainability coordinator, not a necessity. It is not health and safety or public works or school district. So those are the beginning of my suggestions. I would have more, but once again, we still don't have a line item budget. There's been no response to any of the 3 records requests that I've made, and no response to records requests that at least 5 other people have made. And we're talking 30 days, and they're supposed to respond in 10.
Mike Jerry, 110 Line Street. I appreciate that the mayor, in one of his speaks, talked about freezing the hiring of non-essential personnel. I'm just curious, as you as finance committee, do you have any idea how many non-essential personnel that are on the city payroll at this time? And if you don't, then maybe we ought to, because if they're non-essential, then do we? And then basically, is the non-essential personnel cut from both budgets, override budget or no override budget? Again, if you can't give me the answer, who can? Can the mayor give me the answer on how many non-essential personnel we have working in the city? I'd like to know that. Because I think that's a pretty important thing. I mean, if you have 100, how much are they being paid? And that's what you folks need to try to figure out. The second thing I noticed that a couple of people have come up and talked about in regards to values and morals. All right, you're questioning someone's values and morals if they're voting no, or if they're voting yes. You vote your conscience, not whether or not it's moral or it's my values. I'm voting my conscience. And I think that that's what anybody who insults somebody based on their morals or their values because they don't want to vote yes, I think is the reason what the young lady over here said in regard to separating people. And I think the mayor is part of that problem when he marches downtown with students. My question is to you folks too is, what happens if one of those students got hit by a car?
Excuse me, if you are online, just make sure.
I'm just curious, if one got hit by a car, who would be responsible for that? Were those parents notified when those students walked out of class? When you drop your student off at school, isn't the school now responsible, i.e. the city? So those are some of the things I'm just concerned about. And like I said, my morals and my values shouldn't be questioned. I spent 20 years in the military. My values and my morals shouldn't be questioned because I may or may not agree with the directions that the city may take. Thank you.
Anybody else for public speak? Chris, I see your hand. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Chris O'Connor, Ashley Circle. I wanted to mention, the mayor has a new program, the Fund Me type of activity for tax relief. It sounds like a beautiful idea and all that, and I just want the reality part to also be mentioned and to be addressed. There's a process that's going to be involved in this, and I know there was some verbiage that spoke to it, but you got to promote the program, you got to receive the funds, you have to store them somehow and keep accounting of all this. There's a decision committee of some sort or inclusive of some group of people. There's communications that need to go out, whatever. And then there's the actual distributing of it. I'm just thinking of some parts of that process. There is a cost to implement this. We're talking about getting really efficient. And my concern is that there's roles, there's responsibilities, there's, like I mentioned, committees, and there's just basically time involved. People's time will be needed. This should explicitly be outlined and the cost of people's time, process, resources that are required. And I would expect that to have to go back in front of the city council as we're trying to be transparent with everything and see if that makes sense, because we're adding a cost and it's just not being acknowledged. What truly is that? And everybody wants a great, nice, shiny solution, but I think we have to really think realistically on everything that we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public speak? Mayor Derby, do you have any mayor communication? All right, so let's start talking about the budget. And just broad strokes, like, you know, normally in a normal budget year, this would be when we, like at the point where we end up making, any amendments and we just pass the budget. That's usually what this hearing is. That we have 4 hearings where we talk through the budget, and then we have one where we vote on it. If there's any amendments, we make those amendments. Last week when we spoke, there was a sense, I think, from some people on the council and on the city that it would be good to have at least one more meeting to go through some of the like one more meeting where we actually take the votes for a handful of timeline reasons. So that is, I think, what we're still planning on doing. However, we have not really had a chance to deliberate or to discuss anything that we reacted to in a setting where, you know, because I think people get this. It's not legal for us to call each other up and talk about this stuff because there's 3 of us. So if 2 of us are talking, that's a majority of this committee. And so that's an open meeting law violation. So we haven't had a chance to do any of that. So I do want to use some of this time to just have a chance for us to sort of talk about what we reacted to, what we saw, anything that we might be interested in exploring. We don't need to make a final decision, but just things that we might be interested in talking about. I'd also hope that this would be an opportunity for, you know, if there's things that are, you know, we're waiting on from the city, this would be a good time that we could sort of chat through some of that stuff and sort of discuss, you know, if there's any additional information or evolving information that we need to react to. This would be a good time to do that. And if there's questions that we have for department heads pertaining to their budgets, follow-up things or whatever, I think this would be a good time to do that. After that point, I think we'll probably move on to appropriations. But just before we get too into it, I did want to ask just the city, have we resolved this FTE thing?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Is that data that you have?
Yeah. Did we send it to everybody? We just got finished.
Okay.
Yeah,
yesterday.
so I was able to finish it yesterday, but I also wanted human resources as well as the finance team to review it just as in the case of something that there are already a lot of eyes on, more eyes from the city to make sure things look correct is best. That'll be in your inboxes in the morning.
Right. And so there's just a couple things that we want to confirm is around like FTEs and grant funded versus general funded issues to make sure that you have the full complete picture. And again, you know, this was a carryover from 24 and you know, what we've been able to do is we've been able to get a much more accurate count of FTEs. So, you know, just initially that's what people thought was 60 is closer to 40. And that is, you know, including all of the grant funded positions as well. So what we want to do is make sure that you know which ones are grant funded and general funded. Okay. Yep.
Great. Thank you. All right. I will be eagerly looking for that tomorrow. Next up, my understanding from just talking to President Dunham is that our auditor wanted to speak a little bit. Is that?
Yeah, I actually had a question for the auditor. I had a conversation with her last week, and it was just a very fruitful conversation in terms of really just trying to help other counselors understand kind of some kind of key points that have happened that really got us into this particular budget situation. And really this is for the public, but also other counselors who are going to be talking about understanding and explaining the budgets to folks. If the auditor could talk about a couple of those key points.
I've got it right now. I'm not gonna be able to get it on this device.
Yeah, I need to get into the meeting first. Sorry. Yeah.
If you guys can share one.
I'm gonna get it up on screen here.
Okay.
Right.
And if you could give me permission to share if I don't already have it.
Awesome.
Go, I think.
Ida Patel, City Auditor. When I met with Councilor Dunham last week, she asked me to put together in a simple language how we got to this $6.9 million. So I'm going to take a step back into 2 years ago when we did fiscal year 25 budget. With the revenue projection, we had cannabis stabilization fund, which we used one-time money for $57,000. General stabilization, $1.8 million. Tax rate stabilization, $600,000. Just for fiscal year 2025, we used one-time revenue in the total of $2.4 million and $57,000. Year later, when we did FY26 budget, we again used a bunch of one-time money. General stabilization, $1.8 million. Tax rate, general stabilization was actually $4 million, which was $1.8 million, which we used in the prior year, plus $2.2 million. I'll explain why it's a breakdown, but it's at the end, we end up using $4 million out of general stabilization. Tax rate stabilization, $100,000, and one-time overlay money for $400,000. That total one-time fund used to support FY26 budget in the amount of $4.5 million. If we add 2 fiscal years one-time fund usage, it adds up to $6.9 million and $57,000. During those 2 fiscal years, 2025, our budget was increased 9.28% from the previous fiscal year. 26, it was increased on top of 9.28, it was 8.44%. The intention of using $1.8 million in fiscal year 25 was that we are going to fill this money into the general stabilization through our free cash. So during the fiscal year 2025, because we prepared the budget for 2024, in 2025, when free cash got certified, we had enough free cash where we were able to put $1.8 million back into the stabilization account. However, we did not reduce the expense equivalent to $1.8 million. As we know, the budget needs to be balanced. Revenue equals to expenditures. If we were able to put $1.8 million back into the general stabilization, that was the revenue piece. There was no reduction in the upcoming fiscal year, meaning fiscal year 26, or $1.8 million. In fact, it was increased on top of 9.28%, 8.44%. When we are doing during the fiscal year 26, which is again, and during fiscal year 25, we prepared the budget. 26, we got the free cash certified. The hope was that we would be able to put that $4 million back into the stabilization, but it didn't go as we planned. The second hope was that we would be able to at least do $1.8 million, which will lead into having a deficit of $2.2 million. We were on goal that we at least can do like 1.8, and then we'll reduce the budget this year and might have to go for an override for next year. The two big expenditure which hit us this year is one was the health insurance for $870,000. When we were preparing the budget, the snow and ice appropriation, the winter was crazy this year, so we have a one-time appropriation for $582,500, which added up being $1.4 million, $52,500. And we already put in $400,000, which was a little bit over $1.8 million. If these two unexpected expenditures would have not occurred this year, which it was all a surprise to us that health insurance went up middle of the fiscal year, which never happened, at least in the last 10 years when I've been in the audit office. That kind of threw us off the equation. This is one way to look at the revenue side, but when we started working on FY27 budget, we worked on there were two budgets were presented to the city council, but in reality, internally, we worked on 3 budgets. The first budget was the no-cut budget, which everything was like, level funded, as per the mayor's instruction. All the unions are going to get paid as it's part of their contract. The no-cut budget was prepared. Then we found out ourselves that it's not going to work out for us. So we started working on no override budget and a yes override budget. That's where you're seeing these two budgets coming from. Just for an understanding purposes, if you look at the budget trend, the increase this year with no cut was 5.990, not 9 or 8%. With no override, the cuts are so severe that we are going negative 2.18% of compared to what was the budget last year. Yes, override will be 2.51% increase for 2027. We started working on revenues for fiscal year 27. There was, but the gap, how we got to 6.9 again. If you take the number between yes override and no override total budget, it's $407,016.05. We are using general stabilization one-time money again, so that's $2.5 million. We are in negotiations for the enterprise chargeback. The original proposed negotiation was supposed to be 10% across the board. That is going to be revisited now. The estimated revenue from that account was supposed to be $522,805.80. Now, with negotiation, I don't think we're going to get this full amount, but it will be partial amount probably, but I can't speak to it until the agreement is settled. Local receipts are estimated at the higher amount with the current proposed budget with the no override. And the best practices is to have a conservative approach. So I'm leaving $600,000 on table just in case things go south again. We can't project that everybody's going to do like permits and everything, and we're going to have local receipts, which we are seeing right now. If we add all of these numbers, it comes down to $27,521.85. So big picture, if we see what happened in the last 2 fiscal years budget and what we are trying to get at here, it's all come down to plus minus $6.9 million. That is fine.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. That is a way of looking at it. Counselors, any questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the city who wants to say anything before we start talking about amendments?
There was just a couple of questions from the public that were just asked, and I'm just wondering if the mayor could speak to those in terms of the non-essential hires, et cetera. Can you speak to what does non-essential mean? You know, I work at UMass, non-essential means one thing, but I don't know what it means within the context of the city. And so if they're non-essential, are you suggesting that we don't need them in the city right now? Or can you just help the public understand based on what the question was?
So I'd be happy to. I think that what I would have to do in order to make sure that we stay in line with open meeting law is to let me prepare a statement and send that to the council, and maybe at the next meeting I just don't want to get into answering questions that are not on the agenda. It could be.
Yeah, that's not a open meeting law violation. I've asked.
Again, this isn't on the agenda, so I just want to. I'm going to err on the side of caution, and
It's the budget.
I'm going
The
to.
budget, but the budget doesn't actually have, like, the reason this came up is because we were talking about a hiring freeze, which is,
Right.
and it's adjacent to, but technically a little bit. I mean, I think that I am also very curious about just.
I think that this is why, like, when we have public speak, councilors don't respond. And so this was something that was in public speak. Generally, we don't respond to that. And I want to make sure the answer I give is complete and well thought out. So I think that probably would make sense for me to address this, which I'm happy to do.
If you can just send us a memo.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As soon as possible, that would be super good.
Yeah, no problem.
I have another question that is, I think, kind of borderline. I'm sorry, but I think it is budget. I think it's budget related. So I understand from the point of view of the city, why the city gives us the budget in the level of detail that they do, because what a budget essentially is from the point of view of the city is an authorization to spend a certain amount of money. And there's a level of granular detail that I think people understandably would like to see, but that you wouldn't want to make budgetary decisions at quite that same level, because, like, we're not authorizing the city to spend $100,000 on these specific 2 people. We're asking them to spend $100,000 on staff for this department. Who those particular staff are can potentially change over time. So I understand the purpose of that being set up as it is, but I guess it does seem like there's a desire for the public to get a little bit more granular detail on some of these things. And I'm just wondering what among that is, like, practical and doable, and is there something that's forthcoming that could help people understand this stuff a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's reasonable thing to ask. And, one of the reasons why we get it in the format we get it in is to kind of condense things in a more digestible format. And, the more granular, detailed things are things that department heads are putting together. And oftentimes, come out, since personnel is one of our biggest ones, that's like the organizational chart. Is going to show you exactly who's in that department, and it doesn't necessarily it's not who gets paid what, but it's, the number of positions in that department that personnel is going to be, that number is going to be split across. I think probably just efficiency as far as like, we're going to buy 500 pencils and, 2 calculators, that is probably not an efficient level of detail to have department heads put into the budget. And it never has,
Sure.
at least in my time on the council. And I think that in particular, if people had questions on specific areas, I'm sure department heads would be happy to provide, more granular detail in order to give people a better understanding. It's just that if we did that across the board, that would be an exercise in time-consuming exercise that, a lot of department heads are busy doing their job as department heads. And
Sure.
But I think with specific areas, we could work to try to get people more information so they can understand it better. I think it would just be good to know which areas those are so we can focus on those.
Okay. That's, yeah, I guess, I'm just trying to think about how, like there clearly is a desire for this information, and I also understand that there's limitations on what you can respond to in a timely manner, but I'm trying to figure out how we broach
that gap.
Yeah.
Yeah, just for the comment of open meeting law. This is all a part of the budget, and I've reached out to the Attorney General's office the last time this was brought up of like, I'm not going to answer this because it's open meeting law. It is the open meeting law pertains to the city council. It doesn't pertain to the mayor. And so if we are asking for information from the mayor regarding our work, then we're entitled to do that. And that is not an open meeting law violation because you are not a part of the city council. And so that pertains to this body. So if you don't have the information, that's completely different, but that is not related to open meeting law. And if the public comes to us and they're asking us question and you are currently present, then we are within our right to ask that question. So I just want to be clear that if you don't know the answer, that's one thing, but it is not a violation of open meeting law for us to ask you a question since that's our job.
Okay, let's move on. If there's nothing else, then I'd like to start talking about.
Sure.
I'll let you guys, my colleagues, go first. I want to just get your reactions on what we've seen and if there's any amendments that you'd be interested in exploring at this time.
And I certainly have some thoughts. Obviously, I have yet to go through this process at this level without an override happening. So on some level, I'm kind of looking to see how you folks approach this. But just to kind of get the ball rolling, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who has thought about a couple of these things. We talked throughout our meetings about kind of the variation and sort of inequity between some of the departments as it relates to training and travel and certifications and all of that, and longevity stipends, honestly. And so that's one thing I'd be interested in talking about, just to make sure that kind of everybody is being, is approaching this equal, from the same kind of playing field. That's something I'd be interested in talking more about.
Yeah, so I think there's obviously a lot right? I think the first thing that I want to acknowledge is I want to acknowledge the finance team. I think that you all put a lot of work into this in terms of putting together basically 3 budgets, and that's acknowledged, right? That was a lot for you all to have to work through and to have to try to come to some sort of agreement's not the right word, but you had to come to a point where you had to look at what was feasible with the city. I also want to acknowledge all the department heads and all the work that you all put into putting these together. This obviously was not easy. There was a lot, I think, of aspiration in terms of being able to do the work of the people of Easthampton. And I think that it was just as shocking to you all to have to go back and to make cuts, and then to have to go back and make more cuts, and then to have to dig a little deeper to figure out how we were gonna make both sides equal. So I want to acknowledge all the work that you put into that as well. And I also want to acknowledge the human side of that. It's not easy to have to make considerations about laying people off. And I know that you all did a great deal to make sure that you were preserving the people who you were working with. And so I think that when we look at all these cuts and we say, you know, is this person needed or that person not needed? Is this person essential or not essential? The reality is we have the majority of our offices are very small. And when we start to remove those individuals, that's less space time and less opportunity and less contact that office is going to have with residents. And that's an important piece of what this building does or what our schools do, et cetera. When you call and you can't get somebody, the reality is that there's nobody to be had. And so I think from my perspective, what I want to be able to do is make sure that we are able to continue to staff our offices, because that is the city's ability to be able to meet the needs of residents, that face-to-face contact. So I want to acknowledge all of that first. So know that you and the work that you put into this is very much appreciated, and you are seen. In terms of the budgets, I think what I found I don't want to use the word interesting, but which was illuminating, was that I want to be able to figure out if there's some in between that we can find between not passing the override and if the override passes. I do think that we have a responsibility. And when we voted to do an override, right? Whether or not people agree with what we did or didn't agree, essentially it is up to residents of the city to decide how much services they want. And so that's the point of having an override is that voters get to decide whether or not they want less service or they want some level of service. And so our job, I feel like at this point, is to be able to find somewhere in the middle where we can preserve what I would like. I would like to preserve as many of those positions as possible while looking at some of the other items, some of the other expenses, and think about whether or not there's ways for us to bring some of those costs down, much the same way as Councilor Schmidt was saying, in terms of, is there a equal way of us looking at we're finding out who needs certification, who doesn't need certification, so that we have those funds available for other purposes. I'm also curious about, you know, are there some positions that we can, if they are not filled, we figure out, is there another way to be able to make sure that those positions are, or that not having that position filled, is there a way that we can arrange the budget so that that position is taken care of by overtime or whatnot? Or are there ways for us to be able to move some of those positions off because part of it is there's grant funds available, or there's a possibility or a way for us to be able to move that to another budget entirely, whether it's enterprise, et cetera. And so thus making sure that the responsibilities of the city are still being covered, but we just found a different way of being able to fund that position. So I think that's really at this point where I am, because I know, and I think a really good example of this, if I could ask the planner actually to come up just real quick. You know, I think a really good example of this is there are 4 individuals, well, there's 5 individuals in the planning department, if I'm not mistaken, but can you just share for the public the amount of grant funding that you bring into the city, and any outstanding grants that are out there, that if we were to hypothetically remove a position from planning, the impact that that would have on our ability to bring in additional not revenue, but grant funds to help us to be able to complete the projects that we have. Like this to me is really important. I don't know if this is essential, but this is imperative.
Sure. Hey everyone, Alice Manuel, Planning Director. So I just want to start with, you mentioned grants that we bring in. I want to start with salaries, and there's 5 of us in the office. However, our full-time equivalent that's coming from the general fund is 3.69 with the override. Without, it would be 3.24. And then we have 0.65 coming from grants, and that, you know, stays the same without the override. But I did take a few minutes to go through the grants that we've received, and just starting at 2020, since then we've gotten $15.86 million in grant funds. 14.2 of that was for infrastructure. All of that was at a cost to the city of 1.56 million, which is about 10%. So we were able to leverage $15.86 million in funding with 1.5 million, a little over 1.5 million of city money. Right now, we have several grant applications that we've submitted that we'll hear about in the fall, and that they total $8.5 million. So if they all come through, we'll get 8.5 million. And the cost to the city for that 8.5 million is about 900,000 in cash from enterprise funds. You know, water and sewer is one of the big projects, so it'll come from enterprise. So yeah, I mean, we are able to do that because we have the staff that we have. The without override budget does cut one of our staff members to 20 hours. That staff member staffs the Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals, and it requires them to interact regularly with the public to oversee development projects from concept through permitting, and then, you know, follow-up inspections after the fact, plus all the clerical work that goes into those boards. So there's technical work that goes into it that at 20 hours a week, and also the meeting time. You have to set up for the meeting, be there for the meeting. So 20 hours is not enough to have somebody take on all of those responsibilities, which means that they would be transferred to me, likely, especially the technical pieces, because I'll have to go to those meetings. That's at least 3 meetings a month on top of what I'm already doing. And so it will cut into my ability to go to those other volunteer boards or advisory board meetings that I attend, but it'll also cut into my ability to apply for these grants. The $4.8 million grant that went out today, I can't even tell you how much time we took to put that together. Long time, a lot of work, a lot of back and forth with engineers, with staff, with the developer. Like there's just a lot that goes into it. And then there's a lot that goes into administering it when you get it as well. So, there is a cost to the city, of course, but I, do think it's important to point out how much we get in return.
Great. Thank you for that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you said that 0.65 FTEs were coming from grant funding. Could you expand on that a little bit? Just like where those grant funds are going in terms of your personnel budget?
0.05 to myself, 0.3 to the conservation agent, and 0.3 to the senior planner. So some of that is community development block grant money. Some of that is Community Preservation Act. So non-general fund revenue.
What you were going to ask? I was just going to ask what about I thought I'd heard that the arts coordinator was covered by grants.
Her salary is not, however, she in 2026 brought in $57,000.
Okay.
That's donations, sponsorships, grants, and fundraising. Last year was 44,000. The year before that it was 46,500. So it varies, with the grant income that we get. But the city made the decision. Oh gosh, it was before my time. I'm not sure exactly how many years ago, to fully fund the salary with the general fund so that the grants and fundraising could be put towards arts programming for the community.
Okay. Yes, I recall when that happened. All right, thank you. Anyone else have questions?
Thank you for that. Yes, that's really kind of where I am in terms of thinking about the budget and how can we take these two budgets and find a middle ground within that continues to make sure that we have the ability to bring in grant funds, which obviously, as we just heard from Director Manuel, what we're able to leverage with that. I think that's a huge loss for the city to lose key people like that within the city. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Cool. I'll say a couple things that I saw. So I think the first thing that I saw is everyone, like there's the way that the city works with these things where, and I philosophically agree with the decision to do these things the way that they were done. I just also think that like everything has pros and cons. So I think that the broad decision that I saw was for everyone to be, attempting to make a similar percent cut, which I think is probably a good thing in the interest of fairness. I think it's also a good thing in the interest of, I've paid attention to cities going through overrides in the past, and if the departments start fighting each other, it's generally the override fails, and then you have a bunch of departments that got their budgets cut and hate each other, which is not really in anybody's best interest. So I think that makes a lot of sense to do it that way. But what I also did see is that just because of the nature of the funding structures for these different departments and the various mandates that were placed on the departments, it seemed like some departments were much more able to potentially come up with creative ways to do cuts that, I'm not going to say have no cost to them. Everything has a cost, but like the cuts that were already being made, even in the yes override budget to the schools, to me are disturbing. I should also say that, there are members of the public who have views on what things should be going on in the schools, but for whatever it's worth, like that is one area of our budget where we have very little discretion in terms of that. So if the school committee wants to come up with some clever way to consolidate this or move this over to here or whatever, and they've done a lot of that, but if they want to do more of it, that's great. But all we can really do with the school budget is decrease it, right? We're not able to increase it, and we're not able to make line item cuts in the way that we'd be able to make to other departments. I have no interest in decreasing that amount. I think, are we all on the same page on that one?
Yeah, I'm not even sure we're legally allowed. I think we have to pass a balanced budget and that balanced budget comes from the school department, if I'm not, that's my understanding, but I could be wrong, but that's how it was explained to me, but I don't even know if we can cut the budget.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, but yes,
certainly like, so that's, to me, that's off the table.
Yes.
And that is good, but that also has the consequence of that's like, that's such a huge, when you count all the benefits and everything, it's such a huge component of it. So there's places where I did potentially see some things that I'd like to look at, but it's kind of a little bit frustrating because I'd love to make some cuts that are of a magnitude where we can say, hey, look, we did this, this, and this, and now, if the override passes, because we won't be funding these things, we won't actually, to balance the budget, we'll have to go for, but I feel like all the things that I've actually been looking at, like, they're so small, for the most part. But I'll just say a couple things that came to mind. I think to what both of you said, I think I'd be broadly interested in seeing just citywide us maintaining a certain level of uniformity in terms of what our policy is for cutting back on professional development and travel. And so I think what that probably looks like is saying what is essential to each of these offices to maintain credentials and to maintain, there's certain things that you need to do this training to be eligible for, one thing or another that actually do have fiscal impacts on the city. So I don't want to do that, but it's sort of any non-essential like training things. I know that we probably, again, there's probably some technicalities when it comes to exactly what is essential, but I do think that there's some departments that I saw really cut that to the bone, and others maybe I think could follow their example a little bit. So that's one thing where I'd want to see it. When we were talking about like on Thursday, in our Thursday meeting, some of the cuts that Parks and Rec and the Public Works were discussing seemed to be like, okay, maybe if we didn't have all the recreation stuff, maybe the pool, instead of being closed 1 day a week, is closed 2 days a week. Is that good? No. I'd like the pool to be open as much as possible, especially because there's a lot of families that need it. Now, would we as a city survive that cut? Like, yeah, but is it like, are we saving enough money? Like, is it like, is the savings even worth like some kids on a hot day not being able to make it? I don't know. But I'm open to discussing that, I know that when we were talking about the position of the sustainability coordinator, there was an idea to move part of that position onto a grant that would mean that we get less individual hours from that person, because we'd basically be sharing some of those hours with other cities and towns. But I don't know, we'd still get part of that person, and
that's what that role, I think, really looks at the climate action plan. So
yeah,
that's a huge role that individual plays for the city, right?
Yeah, it is. But I also wonder, like, right at this moment when the federal government is where they are, like, are they even poised to really do so that's just something I'd like to get more information on that. And then there was another, I think Director Nuttleman had made a suggestion of potentially moving one person from like highway to sewer, and that would move it would put more on enterprise, but it would take some off the general fund. And like, that's one where like, I don't want one less person on highway, but I also know that our sewer is sort of understaffed. So I don't think that that would be like a horrible thing. So those are some things that like right off the top of my head piqued my interest. Now, but we do all of that and it's gonna, I mean, like, I don't know, it's every dollar counts, I suppose, but I don't think it's, like, I think that when you actually look at the biggest departments, they're also the departments that I have the most trouble figuring out what you could possibly cut in between unfunded mandates, contractual requirements, and just the particular responsibilities that they have for the city. So those are kind of my reactions. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about any of that.
Yeah, for the most part, I agree. I think we need our schools, obviously. I think that if we were to reduce our schools anymore, we're going to have students who go to other school districts, and that's going to be a snowball effect that's really going to drive students away from the schools. That's sad, but that's the reality of that situation. Parents are going to choose to put their kids in the best learning environment for them. I mean, we live in a very competitive society, and if we have to cut our athletic programs, then they are going to go to a school district that's going to give them the opportunity for their kids to participate in sports and athletics. There's nothing that I don't know how to fix that. I think I am also equally concerned about some of our smaller departments, Council on Aging. To have a no override is going to cut deeply into the services that they provide. So I went to a information session last week. They would close for a day. That's a day when they get meals delivered. That has a real impact. Socialization, people connecting, that has an impact. The library, I don't want to talk about the library because Councilor Smith's circumstances, but that's an impact, as well as veteran services. That's another small department, and any small cut from that actually has a huge impact. The smaller our departments get, so any cuts really impact those, and those are some of our most vulnerable populations within the city. So that's a concern for me.
Yeah, and just one other thing I want to say is just as we're talking about making amendments, we say amendments, cuts, right? Like we can't move things, we can't increase things. All we can do is cut. One thing I just want to be mindful of, and something that at times gave me a lot of anxiety looking at the no override budget, is what I think I referred to previously as dynamic effects. I'm sure there's a more like layman friendly term for this, but I don't, ripple effects, let's just say, that come out of these things where you change one thing, but it causes other changes. So the schools, I think, are maybe one of the most obvious examples where like the amount of revenue that we receive for our schools and the amount that we have to pay out in our school district are both directly correlated to the choices of parents, both in Easthampton and outside of Easthampton, to send their kids here instead of somewhere else. And so if you make a cut that saves you a certain, like a salary, but then that same cut prompts multiple parents to send their kids to charter schools, well, that we might have not, like, in terms of this budget, which is static, it's a moment in time. It doesn't, and I don't think this is anyone doing anything wrong, by the way. I just don't think that it's when we are looking at these budgets, I don't think it's generally required in the state to estimate sort of what the ripple effects of these things are going to be. So the budget says, okay, you save X percent from cutting this teacher, but that doesn't necessarily account for the unemployment that we'd have to pay, or the choice out that could cause, or like any of these sort of the lower state revenue if our employment or our enrollment keeps falling. Like these are all like things that I think I just want to be really careful if we're talking about these things to make sure that we're not making a budget that looks fiscally responsible on paper, but in reality has a bunch of booby traps set into it that are going to go off the second that the fiscal year starts and the implications of these cuts actually start occurring. So that's something I want to be careful about. But the other thing I would just say is that like we're not going to make any final decisions tonight. So if you're watching online currently or later, and you have thoughts about, maybe you have a perspective that we don't, maybe you understand something that we don't, feel free to, and I would encourage you to reach out, email us, and let us know what your thoughts are, because we are we're all part-time people who come in the evening, and maybe somebody has a more specific understanding of one department, or they have some great idea that hasn't occurred to us.
Yeah, I do have an ask, so I'll reach out to department heads and ask what certifications are for this fiscal year or coming fiscal year. If your office doesn't have one, your department doesn't have one, then please acknowledge that. If it does, and these are the two people that have that, help shed light on that, because that is an area that I do want to, and all three of us now at this point have talked about that, is there a way for us to figure out a way of figuring out what that funding could look like for departments, so that we can, again, I want to find something that's somewhere in the middle here so that we can bring that number down.
Okay. The other thing that I just want to say is that over this process, I have heard a lot of suggestions from members of the public that are, I think, potentially interesting, but not things that can be implemented in this budget per se. There's thoughts about could we find ways to consolidate certain things, certain functions within general government? And I think the answer is we should probably look at that, but I don't know. I don't know, and I don't know how we find out how to do that responsibly. And frankly, I think that some of the ways in which we maybe haven't, some of the internal central government processes in the city maybe haven't functioned the way that you or I or the taxpayers would like them to. I think that some of that started with well-intentioned efforts to say, oh, we'll just have this person do both these jobs. Or instead of this person who costs a lot of money, we'll have this person who costs less money. And some of that did save the city money, but sometimes it also, I think maybe if we had explored the full implications of some of that, there would have been pitfalls that we would have been aware of. So that's something I want to just be aware of. But I think that that's where I am right now. Again, I'd love to hear more suggestions from the public, especially anything, just an email, so that I can have it in writing and I can then go and research it. But Yeah, there's a few efficiencies that people pointed out in their no override budget that I actually think are worth exploring, but I don't think any of them are gonna save us $6 million. So, yeah, I think that's where we should probably pick up next time.
Can I just ask, this is a bit of a, taking us back into deliberation a tiny bit, but I did have a question that I just wanted to get some clarification on. Obviously, we saw throughout our discussions, the sort of union agreed upon reduction of staff's hours. We did see, of course, a sort of freeze on, I think, step increases for leadership positions. We've heard some discussion or suggestions about, or concerns, about kind of bottom level cuts versus top level cuts. And I've of course heard instances throughout this where, we have had offices rearranged. I think specifically of the K through 8 school where they've cut an administrative position. But along those lines, I just wonder, and this is not going to be a popular opinion in this room, sorry, but in looking at kind of leadership salaries within each department, the time cut for those union staffs was about 5%. It is 2 hours out of a 40-hour work, which is probably not quite right, but somewhere around 5%, probably more if it's less than 40. Do we have any, is it even within our purview to say, to look at even like a 1% decrease on certain salaries kind of across the board, just thinking how that could potentially add up? I just don't even know if that's allowed, and I was looking for clarification on that.
I actually would also like a little bit of clarification on sort of a related issue, which is it did seem like there's a lot of cases in the no override budget, particularly within general government, where people are free, like they're not taking a step increase, or they are forfeiting a year of their longevity pay or whatever. And I'm like, I guess what my question would be is that strictly a voluntary thing? Because we do have contracts with all these people. So is that something that I'm just kind of wondering how that works out. If we were to say about, well, maybe we need to freeze some salaries, even if it passes, to sort of help bring the override number down a little bit. Is that even within our purview, or is that something that's going to get us sued for even talking about that? I don't know if there's somebody who wants to weigh in on this.
Emily Russo, Human Resources Director. So for the contracted positions, such as the chiefs or the deputy chiefs, we would have to bargain those things with those positions. For the department heads, you can do a freeze. It is pay plan, so it is in the charter for the pay scale, but I imagine we can make an amendment to that as long as the council obviously agrees. As far as longevity goes, that is a policy with the city, and the mayor does have the right to amend that policy because those department heads are not unionized. So we made that temporary amendment this year to put the cap at $250 for longevity. So.
Thank you.
But that's in the no override.
Right. Yeah. But what I'm saying is again, not an unpopular opinion with people in the room, but if we're looking at what can we cut without a catastrophic damage, like what sacrifices, what additional sacrifices could we make even in a yes override vote? I don't know where I am on it. I'm just saying that's a place where that's something we could consider, is to say,
Yeah. So if I could say something, I'm not opposed, right? I think we have to consider everything. I think that we have to think about what is fair. So for example, in the no override, everybody got 250. Right? Someone who's been here 34 years got 250, and someone who was here for 5 years got 250. So I think we need to think about what fairness looks like, and then what what does a percent look like? So I think there's more to it than just that, because I think
Sure.
there's a level of equity that is really rubbing me the wrong way in some of this. Again, in the no override, it's the Ask Me People union that got cut 2 hours. That union is predominantly women, and other unions, didn't have those 2-hour cuts. So I think that we have to be equitable when we're thinking about those, and we have to think about what is the impact of that, because I don't like the lowest paid workers in the city being the ones who were most negatively impacted.
So just a couple of quick things. So for longevity, kicks in at 10 years. And, as we looked at that, that was one of the things as we looked at each department's target that we needed to use to try to, especially some of the smaller departments that didn't really have much to cut. So it was just one of the things that we were able to it was like a negotiable. And then for the department head salary, that should be in both the freeze for department heads should be in both the override and non-override budget.
Okay, let me double check with that. I thought I saw a couple of places where maybe it wasn't, but
there might have been a it should be in both.
The building inspector voluntarily got cut, so that was less.
Yeah, well, okay, all right, cool, thanks, I appreciate that. Actually, Mayor, one more thing, if you don't mind. Sure. I think because it is, like, Councilor Denham just brought it up, and it's interesting that in most of the departments, or with most of the labor unions, the idea was that there'd be a certain number of people whose full-time positions or part-time positions would be cut entirely. But then with the Ask Me people, the idea is to across the board make a smaller cut. And I've always intuited why I think the answer for that is, but could you explain sort of the logic behind that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So basically we had two options with the Ask Me union, which was to either cut positions or to do an across the board cut. And so we kind of worked with the unions and brought those two things forward. And, it seemed more equitable to look at, cutting everybody's hours a little as opposed to cutting some people's hours completely and laying them off. And the reason why it's that union and not, say, fire union is there's different levels of, workplace standards that have to be followed in order to meet, certain, state requirements. So it wasn't something that we could, and the same with the teachers. They have a certain amount of time that they have to be in front of the students. So there were other constraints besides desire. It was more like constraints that were hard constraints that we didn't have the ability to modify because of regulation.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
That's interesting. My thought had just been that because some of those departments are so small, that might have had a role to play in it. Like if a department's 2 people, it's sort of tough.
It's hard to make that cut.
A person. But that's interesting. Are there other departments where that was an option and we opted to not explore it, or other unions rather?
No, I mean, so basically because of, like I said, because of the workplace conditions for police, fire, and schools, that those are layoffs because we can't modify their hours because of the confines that they operate within. And so really, but what we did was we looked at there's 3 sections of the Ask Me union, and we looked across the board and did last year, if you remember, there was some people had their hours cut, and a lot of people didn't. And so what we felt was, instead of picking and choosing, because we could have done that too, we felt like it was more equitable to just go across the board. So there was no favorites, there was no kind of perception of favoritism or, holding one department above another.
Questions? Okay, so.
Although if I may, I will just to follow up on the longevity question, not questioning that it was a part of this negotiation in the first place. I think if I'm understanding your point correctly, Councillor Denham, I think to me, if our goal is to recognize longevity, it would have made a lot more sense to kind of decrease the same amount from each total rather than bring everybody down to that same number that is basically treating a 10-year the same as a 30-year. Small numbers in the grand scheme of this budget, of course, but I think that would have made a lot more sense to me in terms of making sure that there was, that we're still recognizing what people have put into the city.
So would what you be suggesting to be like alternatively doing it as like a percent cut?
I mean, I probably would have just suggested a flat number if it was up to me, and some people might not get a longevity, stipend who would have otherwise gotten one if they were below that number. It would essentially be saying, this stipend kicks in at a later date for this year.
Okay.
That was my thinking.
Okay. Well, I don't know that. I guess, most of those cuts are to the no override budget, right? So I guess if we come back next week and we're looking at the no override budget, then I think that that's something that we could have a fair conversation about, just whether there'd be I think early on we said we were going to have some, back and forth with the city. And so I think that that's something we could at least ask people to look into. But I don't, I maybe it would be best for us to not get too in the weeds on that until we know that we have to. But I think that it's a fair point and something that we can explore.
But I think for me, right, I think when we look at, even if this passes, right, I'm looking to come back and make some amendments to the override, right? So just so people who are listening, right, like I think there's a number of things that can come out of that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that that's, we're going to have to. I just think that most of the things that I'm seeing are like small, like they're meaningful for the purpose of like, we wanted every dollar counts, but just in terms of like the actual impact on the taxpayer,
it adds up though.
Yeah, anything helps, I guess. So, okay. Anything else on this topic? All right, department heads, unless you want to talk about these appropriations, I think you are off the hook. So I think the first appropriation in the stack is $20,000 from free cash for school Medicare and Medicare tax. Anyone from the city want to speak to this?
Hi, Brooke Johnson, City Treasurer. I'm sorry, this is my first appropriation, so bear with me.
Wow.
So this is for the payroll side of everything. The city pays 50/50 on Medicare tax. It is an extremely hard thing to estimate each year. So this is for city and school. I believe the split is 12,000, 8,000 in front of you, 12,000 for school employees, 8,000 for city employees. And this is to get us through the last two payrolls of the year. And the reason the school is so high is because, in case you are unaware in the public, there's two payrolls for the city or for the school side on the last payroll date. And one is called a balloon payroll, where a lot of teachers elect to get paid out for the summer in one giant lump sum, which increases our Medicare tax.
Okay. Counselors, questions?
I do, I guess I do,
Yeah.
yeah. Regarding that last point that you made, does that, is it a lot because we're just facing it all at once, or is it more upfront than it would be if they were taking the pay in a distributed fashion?
A little bit of both, just because it's a 50-50 percentage. So if they're getting a larger lump sum payout, the calculation, it kind of increases it at the end of the day.
Okay, well,
That's one more question.
yes.
And is that a negotiated benefit, do you know?
It's state mandated.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I would entertain a motion to recommend the supplemental appropriation of $20,000 to the full council.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next one up is $23,000 from free cash to the auditor's salary.
City Auditor. This has to do with my hours being reinstated. The first portion was funded till December 31st. Then the discussion, the agreed upon term was that we'll see when new mayor comes in, what's gonna happen. If I'm gonna keep my 40 hours or I'm gonna go back to 35 hours. With a significant backlog from fiscal year 25 due to vacancy in the treasury office, decision was made that it will be extended and the workload has been increased. So this 23,000 is a combination for the half of the fiscal year's reinstated hours and the extra hours I'm doing to catch up with 26 backlog now.
Okay, well, this is something I think we all knew was coming, but does anybody have any questions about it? All right, I would entertain a motion to recommend the supplemental appropriation to the full council.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we already did the election workers one. Okay, this is the snow one. So we've got $582,500 coming from free cash. That's going to snow overtime, snow equipment rental, snow miscellaneous professional services, snow repair and maintenance, snow chemicals, salt, and school plowing. I just want to remark, because I just think it's something that the public might not be aware of. Salt cost us $241,000 this year. If somebody can figure out a way to make cheaper salt, like, let us know. That is, I mean, it is what it is, and especially the mountain, like, you have to salt it or people are gonna die, but like, it's crazy how much money. I think if you asked most people in Easthampton, how much do you figure we spent on salt a year? They probably wouldn't say $240,000.
And I would say just the overall amount of snow and ice removal for this year was pretty significant. It was a tough winter. I do believe the increase in the cost of salt had to do with one of, there was a backlog of ships, and one of the ships that was carrying the salt was stuck out. And so that caused a delay. And that was one of the reasons for the increased cost.
That's interesting. And
Shipping delays.
there's a lot of things that happen to cities that we can't control shipping delays.
Yeah, and I just want to also remind the council that this is on top of the, I think it was around 200,000 we budgeted for snow removal.
Right.
And so this is additional.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money to take care of snow and ice and keep our streets.
Yeah.
Some of the best in Western Mass.
Dr. Nettleman's on the call too. I don't know if he wants to
Sure. I mean, I don't really, this is something we do every year. It's like this, we never like we usually there's like a weird little legal provision about budgeting around snow removal in Massachusetts. So it basically always comes down to a free cash appropriation. And I think if there's ever a bad enough winter that we couldn't, there's actually a way that we can we can roll some of that over into prior years if you have to, but obviously you don't want to do that. And so it kind of feels like that's just like, I think we all knew looking at the winter this year that we were going to probably be going for a big free cash appropriation for snow. I certainly did. So, are there any questions that anyone has? All right, well then I would entertain a motion to recommend the supplemental appropriation to the full council.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, next one up, this is a $60,182,000 appropriation and 16 cents from free cash. Sorry, is there a problem with it?
Yeah, you said 60,000, 182,000.
Oh, $60,182
Okay.
and 16 cents.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to do this and run traffic control on the beats, and sometimes my words get mixed up. It is not. Yeah. Okay. It's from free cash. This is sort of written in sort of a confusing way, but basically it says can't serve CIS health system other expenditures for $48,529.16, and then school nurses system professional salaries $11,653. Would somebody like to speak to this one?
Sure. During the school year, we had a nurse in place. She went out on medical leave. We had to pay an agency for the day-to-day coverage for that RN. So that's that first $42,529, $529.16. And then there's a one-time placement fee. So we ended up hiring the nurse full-time. So we had to pay the agency $6,000 to hire the nurse full-time. We posted for the position multiple times. She wanted to work for us. She's highly qualified. She's great with our students. And there was a differential from her salary because of her years of experience. She had over 25 years of nursing experience. So there was a differential between the nurse that we had and then the nurse that we hired. So that total amount was $60,182.16.
Okay. Counselors, questions?
Just a comment. I think just given the budget conversations, I think this is a really good example of just unanticipated expense that the city is responsible for. There's no blame. It's just the circumstances that we have to deal with sometimes. And
we need an RN at the school.
Yeah,
and
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to see what the alternative path would be. So, totally agreed. I would entertain a motion to recommend the supplemental appropriation to the full council.
So move. Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, this one's $10,000 from free cash to city attorney professional expenses. Here.
Yep. So if you remember back to last year, almost this exact very time, one of the things that happened was the amount that was budgeted for city legal fees was cut by the council out of the budget. And basically with the intention of having the mayor's office come back to get those funds as needed. And, I think this might be the third time. And we never asked for the full amount back, but we're trying to go bit by bit as we use it. And especially with all the union negotiations that are happening right now with budget cuts and all of these things, this isn't the amount that we need to make it through the fiscal year.
Councilors, questions? None here, so I would entertain a motion to recommend the supplemental appropriation to the full council.
So moved.
Motion is second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, next up, we've got $8,700 from free cash to park site improvements. There's a typo on this one. But it looks, yeah, this is for a 12-month rental of a maintenance office trailer. Does anyone want to speak to this one?
Is John online?
John had a prior commitment tonight, so this is the maintenance shed had to be torn down and was condemned. And so this was, a temporary solution to have maintenance workers be able to have a space.
Okay. Any questions?
I guess, yeah, my question is, is there a long-term plan beyond the 12-month rental, or is it to kind of maintain that approach?
14?
Two months for this year and then 12 months.
14, yeah, it's 14 month. Yeah, there is a long range plan. And so Parks and Rec Commission has worked to identify what it would cost to replace that facility. And so right now we're basically trying to work with the director and Parks and Rec Commission to look at how we can make sure that all the staff have an appropriate place to work, especially during the winter months. And that would probably need to be funded with a capital stabilization. And we're still kind of waiting on the plans and what that would cost and how that would move forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I would entertain a motion to recommend this appropriation to the full council.
So second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then, yes. So, that's all our appropriations. Thank you. That's all the ones that are in this packet. So do we,
I'm sorry, I was questioning whether elections, I ran downstairs to get my.
Oh, we did
That was
elections
last week. I apologize, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so that's all we've got for appropriations. So I think the other thing that we could potentially talk about is we could talk about the tax exemptions or some of the policies that have been sent to us for new business already. I don't know sort of where you guys are with that, if we want to do that as like a dedicated meeting, or we want to talk about it now, or.
Well, I was hoping that the Dan Sadonic from the Board of Assessors, he was here earlier, and he was going to talk about it, but they left. So it'd probably be good if we have to do it.
Honestly, I'd love to talk through those policies in a meeting that was not also a budget meeting, because these budget meetings are important, but they're also, if I'm being honest, a little intellectually draining, and going through all this other stuff, like when I'm already kind of, to talk through this, it's just a lot. So let's try and let's get a meeting on the books to just talk about that. Maybe just our regular, like a regular meeting that we'd have next week. We can talk about this. We'll also have to, of course, figure out when
We'll have more appropriations next week, so.
Yeah, okay, so.
But there won't be as many.
Yeah.
There will be as many.
Cool. Well, anyway, we'll do appropriations and policies. We can do that. And then we'll want to set up a separate thing to keep talking about the budget. But I think for now, I'd be open to adjourning.
To adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.